Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. I'm Chad Booth. You go to buy a house and you secure financing. You make plans, you say I've got to raise my family, I got to have a place that's paid for in retirement, and so you obligate yourself to a mortgage for the next 30 years. What happens if you're a community, if you're a county, say? How do you go about securing that mortgage? Well, that's the topic of our show today as we look at public finance and the key instrument in public finance, the bond. A bond is to a county like your mortgage is to you. So today we will look at the process for applying for and qualifying for, the process of obtaining, and the benefits that come from public finance and bonding. We will start with the basics.
Libraries and senior centers are a part of the fabric of our communities. We often take them for granted along with the services they provide, without ever thinking about what went into building them in the first place. We assume our tax dollars paid for these types of improvements, but generally, anytime a county or a municipality is adding to the infrastructure of a community, they're going to have to obtain a bond. Now, most of us have voted on bonds in local elections, but what does it mean when a community votes on bonding for a particular project?
On the general obligation bond, you're basically saying to your citizenry and your taxpayer, we're going to obligate this financing on your property, and the assessment will have to take care of repayment in that.
This particular type of bond has to go to a vote because the bond is based on the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the county. The property within the county is the collateral. These bond obligations are considered low risk, meaning the community can secure a better interest rate.
Debt is a tool that we use to purchase the buildings and make construction that we need for the needs of the county. Things like a courthouse, like a jail, like a hospital. Those things are needs in the community that no one individual could purchase on their own. So government steps in and builds the need for the public.
In these bonding arrangements, governments use debt as a tool, which can come as a surprise considering how most politicians in Utah consider debt akin to a four-letter word.
It is in many ways if you go overboard with it, but the difference between a private enterprise and government is private enterprise can save money and reserve it to build and to do those kinds of projects with, but county and government should not. Because if we have all that money that we're reserving that's coming from the taxpayers, it properly belongs in the pocket of the taxpayers. When you construct something, it should stand on its own and be a viable entity in and of itself. We shouldn't be saving tax dollars and reserving them.
In other words, many of these projects are a benefit to the citizens of today. So saving money to build a library 10, 20, or 40 years down the road doesn't make a lot of sense to the people paying the taxes now. In most cases, these are community assets that will last for several generations, so the bonding process works best for everyone. Now, there are limits to the amount of money a community can bond. That is set by state statute. Those borrowed dollars will have to be repaid eventually, so it is important that a county consider their options when deciding how to fund a particular piece of infrastructure, or whether it even needs to be built in the first place.
You have to look at it carefully when you bond, and you don't just bond to be building, you bond only to build the needs, and very carefully evaluate what the wants of your public are.
What's a need and what's a want? And then that's not to say we won't get into bonding for wants. They better be pretty well thought out and the kind of thing that adds value.
Expanding the infrastructure within a community is a long-range game that requires some careful planning in not only what kind of buildings need to be built, but how and when they'll be paid for. Citizens can decide whether to bond for improvements or not, since they'll be the ones footing the bill. For the county seat, I'm Terry Wood.
Carla pointed something out as a reminder to remember always that public finance, while it's a good thing, is competing for the same pool of dollars that you and I use to borrow to build our own houses and our businesses and send our kids to college. So you have to be very responsible with public debt. That being said, we'll bring in our panel of experts when we come back and talk about public finance.
We all assume that the food we eat is safe, but how do you know? Well, it starts on the farm and continues every step of the way to your local grocery store. So when you bring home food, you do so with the peace of mind that it's safe, fresh, and nutritious, thanks to the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, the guardians of Utah's food supply and sustainable agriculture. Learn more by visiting ag.utah.gov.
There are a couple great things about the Uinta Basin. One is it's still small, it's community. That makes you feel like when you go somewhere, you know everybody. When you know your neighbor knows you, and you can trust each other, people look out for one another.
I grew up in the Uinta Basin, and I think that it's a good place to raise a family.
So we packed up our 3 kids, and here we came to Uinta County, and what a great place it was.
It's not too big, it's not too small.
And it has a lot to offer that you just don't get in the big city anymore.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our conversation today is about public finance, bonding in particular. And we have a really seasoned panel joining us today. Jon Bond, who is the Weber County Treasurer, Commissioner Bret Millburn from Davis County, and Jon Bronson, who is a Senior Vice President of Public Finance with Zions Bank. A lot of people don't even understand how it goes about. So let's walk through very briefly the process of bonding, start to finish.
Okay, maybe I can take the lead on that. As a county and county commissioner, as we're looking at providing services and infrastructure, particularly for our citizens, and looking at the long term, we look at the utilization of bonds as a way to accommodate major things like buildings and maybe some flood infrastructure, things of that nature. It's not utilized for day-to-day operational things, but the construction of a library per se, something that's going to be used for generations. And it's not that you have the money saved up for a multi-million-dollar project, so you look to borrow that and have those generations that are going to be using it help pay for that over the course of time.
So I guess obviously it starts with the decision by the commission to seek a bond, and then somebody is responsible for starting the process, and then they come to you. Mm-hmm. How does that process work from the bank standpoint?
Usually in the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, recommends that you start by hiring a financial advisor or a municipal advisor. A municipal advisor sits on the government side of the table and acts as a fiduciary to them and almost an extension of their office in helping them obtain the best bond financing they can get, both in terms of interest rate and cost of issuance. And so hiring a municipal advisor is the first step.
All right, let me turn that into mortgage fees. Interest rate transfers right over. Cost of issuance, those are like closing costs?
They are, yes.
Okay. Trying to keep something that relates at home.
Yeah.
What determines an interest rate?
The market determines the rate, also the type of bond that you issue and the rating on that bond. And so an interest rate is built by an expectation of inflation plus a risk factor plus a real rate of return. That's what forms an interest rate. But how long you borrow, what you're borrowing for, and what the rating is of the entity that's borrowing and the collateral you're offering all affect the interest rate.
Okay, collateral is an interesting question. Now, do counties collateralize the buildings they're building, or do they collateralize future taxes?
They can do either. You can collateralize with the full faith and credit and taxing ability of the county, or you can collateralize with a specific revenue stream or with specific real assets. And that's what determines the different types of bond that you would issue.
Most people will be aware of the terms general obligation bond and a revenue bond. So maybe we start with those two and then just add a couple of others. What's the difference?
Maybe I can cite three very specific examples in Weber County that we've done over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years. We did a joint venture project with Weber State University up on campus by the D Event Center. And with that, Weber State came in with some contributions and some of their own money. We came in with some money from Weber County, and in that case we did a sales tax bond. A sales tax bond then was used. The collateral was the stream of money that we get from our sales tax. And that was sufficient collateral for investors to feel secure that they could invest in our bonds. We also recently did a bond with our library expansion and remodel. And with that then we went out to the public, asked them to vote. It was our first mail-in vote throughout the entire Weber County. And with that they said, okay, we want to take that onto our shoulders and call it a government obligation bond through a vote. And that then adds the security of being able to tax those individuals, our property owners, and it gives us a better position to go out into the market and get a better interest rate. We also, in a third project, tried to act as a catalyst for a group that came in and purchased Powder Mountain Ski Resort. And there's an area right next to that they wanted to expand and put housing and a lot of buildings, facilities, hotels, that type of thing. And in that case, we co-signed, so to speak, in that situation and had an assessment bond so that those people who buy property in that area are assessed every year an amount, and that's where the bond payment comes from. So we had a sales tax bond for the expansion with Weber State.
And that would follow under revenue, basically.
A GO bond, which was with our library remodel, and then an assessment bond with the individuals at Powder Mountain. So those were three very distinct different bonds that we were experienced just recently.
Yeah, actually I'll just chime in and say, Chad, you identified really the two types of bonds, a general obligation bond and a revenue bond. Every other kind of bond is a type of a revenue bond, really. And so there's general obligation bonds where you're pledging the full faith and credit and taxing power of the county versus a revenue bond where you're identifying a specific revenue stream, and there are lots of different types of revenue streams you can offer as collateral, and they make up the different types of revenue bonds there are. The only one that requires a vote of the people is the general obligation bond because you're pledging the full faith and credit and taxing power on the taxable property within the county as the debt, and so the voters have to approve that.
Okay. So let me ask a sidebar question, unless you had a follow-up?
No, I was just going to say, and as an entity like in Davis County, when we're looking at the possibility of bonding, oftentimes we'll analyze each one of those types, whether it's a general obligation or a sales tax revenue or other revenue stream bonding, to see which one is most beneficial to use at any given point in time. Generally speaking, it's nice to go out to the public and have their buy-in, but sometimes time is of the essence. And for example, when we built a new county administration building here in the last few years.
Very nice, by the way.
The going out for a general obligation bond would have taken a year plus to go through that process. If we had done that, we would have lost out on a year of very low interest rates and a very desirable building environment. This was during the course of the recession. And if we'd gone that general obligation direction, it would have cost us a lot more in the long run.
So you went a different direction.
So we went a different direction.
All right. And that decision's made jointly. I mean, I guess very quickly, as we tried to get this panel together, we were looking for the bonding officer, and we found treasurers in some counties, commissioners in others, and clerk auditors in yet others. So it's a broad array. How does one determine who is responsible for bonding?
Well, it really constitutes a team. And in Davis County, it's the commission, it's the clerk auditor, it's the treasurer, and then of course financial counsel. But and it takes a team. But at the end of the day, it's the commission that signs the dotted line and is on the hook.
Okay, very good. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with our conversation on general obligation, revenue bonds, and revenue streams in the county. We'll be back in just a second.
What's the story of your life? What chapter are you on? Did you happen to get married recently? Perhaps you found your lost puppy at the animal shelter. Or you're taking an art class at the senior center. There's that flu shot that kept you well last season. And don't forget the museums and historical sites your family loves. And all the fun you have at the County Swim Center. County services from search and rescue to maintaining roads bring tremendous value to each of our lives. We're the Utah Association of Counties, helping you build the story of your life.
There is a place where young and old make connections. Where kids feel like grown-ups. And grown-ups feel like kids. There is a place where beauty arises in contrast. Where wonder is universal. And laughter second nature. There is a place where friends find a future. Families find each other. And feelings find their home. There is a place.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Have you ever wanted to recreate the world around you? Add some excitement, culture, adventure? Well, there's no need to remake the world when that perfect combination already exists. Just remember 4 words. Welcome to Weber County. In Ogden, you'll find everything you're looking for, from the top of Powder Mountain to the restaurants of our revitalized downtown. Ogden, Utah. Mountain to metro and everything in between. Visit Ogden.com.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about bonding today as part of a county's operating process. So I guess, you know, we've made some references to bonding is kind of like getting a mortgage. And people just hear about bonds all the time. And they say, oh, great, there's money. It's not a grant, though. It is a loan.
It is a loan.
So when does the county realize they're at their capacity?
Great question.
Good question.
There's all sorts of capacity limits, some established by statute in the Utah Code. Especially for the general obligation bonds that we talked about, there's a limitation that's tied to the tax base. It's a percentage of the tax base. For other bonds, revenue bond types, the market will limit counties in what they can borrow, and the limitation is what can they afford to pay back. And nobody's going to lend them money if they can't afford to pay it back, and so the market will limit the counties. And then the counties will have their own internal view of what their limits are as well.
And I think that's probably the most important part, at least it is in Davis County, is, okay, yeah, you can have caps and limits, but we don't ever look at it and say, okay, we have that much capacity, so we're going to go out for the max. And it'd be like maxing your credit card all the time. That's just not the judicious and prudent thing to do. We try to take a very balanced and serious approach to this and really study it and be very judicious and strategic in the use of bonds. Bonds isn't the first thing that we go and do. We try to find ways to work around and address those neades.
Basically, use the tune-up tools before you get out the hammer.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know, well, for a capital project, for example, for a health building, we actually saved money and saved cash, pay cash for that, but we can't. That was within a certain, you know, less than $10 million, and over a few years, you can probably put that kind of money away. But when you're looking at, you know, $25 or $30 million for a project that's going to last 50 or 75, it doesn't make sense to have the current residents, the current taxpayers, pay for that all today, and rather than, but instead spread that over the course of time.
So you guys have to look at this as you have to be constantly watching your cash flow, and I suppose it's kind of like, and I don't know how many banks are doing this, but I mean, you know, you get credit card offers all the time. What kind of discipline actually goes into the process of bonding?
Well, I think Commissioner Millburn brings up a very valid point, and that is he's making decisions now that will span 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road, as have commissioners prior to him.
I'm dealing with that.
And he's inherited, as he's elected, and all elected officials then inherit those decisions from prior commissioners from 5, 10, 15 years ago. And as you look at our legislature, they've designed a series of laws that help create predictability in that whatever our budget was last year, we can bring that forward to this year, plus new growth. What that means then is you have a predictable amount that you can almost guarantee that you can bring forward. But as the needs are understood and evaluated by the commissioners in this team, certain decisions have to be made where there are pressure points or needs, and decisions have to be made. Once you get to that point, then you have to say, how will we then predict down the road how other commissioners will deal with the cash flow that we've got and this somewhat guaranteed budget from one year to the next. And they have to balance all those decisions and say, are the needs significant enough that we want to go long term, or do we want to deal with these problems on a year-to-year basis and with the budget that we've got?
And there are all sorts of things that enter into that. Commissioner Millburn talked about kind of generational transfer. Are you going to have the people that are paying for the facility be the ones that are using it? Or are you going to save up and tax people over a long period of time for something that they may never use and that will be used by future generations? There are all sorts of decision points along the way in making those decisions.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because that would intimate to me something very specific, that you better be careful about, you know, not going specifically for the best. You better build it well. If people are going to be paying for it and using it for 50 years, you don't want the asset to like fall apart in 10. So I guess that becomes a factor.
It does.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with our county seat on bonding. We'll get our closing thoughts and any points that we've missed in the discussion so far. We'll be right back.
The weekends just never feel like they're long enough. By the time you get to a destination, you're worn out and you may need a vacation to recover from your last vacation. The solution is closer than you think, and that's just what you need. You can find the desert at Little Sahara, the cool refreshment of Yuba Lake, escape to the green of the forest on the Nebo Loop. Make your escape to Juab County. It'll change your family forever.
The Bear Lake Valley is a beautiful, rural, historical, and recreational paradise. The changing of the season makes now a great time to come our way to see the warm colors of fall in contrast with the cool blues of Bear Lake. Visit us in the Bear Lake Valley. Come for the ride, stay for the adventure.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
Welcome back to the county seat. We promised this to be the wrap-up, see if there's anything we've missed in our discussion. Gentlemen, what have we not talked about?
Public finance is a very esoteric world, both in the area of finance and the area of law, and you need specialists to do it. Not every bank will engage in public finance. Some will buy bonds, but there aren't many banks that will act as a financial advisor, for example. And then there are underwriting firms that will underwrite, and they're doing that as a specialty. Not every law firm will know how to put a bond together. It takes special knowledge and special expertise among bond attorneys and tax specialists.
I thought maybe I'd just close with just a quick example of how Davis County has utilized bonds. Davis County, one of the responsibilities the county has is flood control. And as we look at the various projects that need to be done, you can have a whole series of projects that cost millions and millions of dollars, but to take care of that one project at a time over the course of years, it might take us 40 years to do that. By then you got to start all over again. By utilizing bonds and being strategic and using bonds as a tool, we're able to, especially during the downturn in the economy, we borrowed at a very low interest rate and took advantage of contractors that are very hungry and knocked off a whole bunch of those projects off a 40-year list, and basically cut that list in half. And we're able to accomplish a lot and keep our public safe and things of that nature.
The smart use of debt is a good tool.
I was going to say that you probably saved as much or more in discounts from hungry contractors than you paid in interest if the interest rate is appropriate.
Well, and bottom line, we've kept people safe, and in some instances, by the projects we've done, we've actually put money back in the citizen's pocket. We've been able to take, by putting in a flood project, mitigating the risk, we've taken them out of a floodplain, which then they don't have to pay flood insurance. So it's a win-win-win all the way around.
That is a good use. John, any last thoughts? Any stories from customers coming into the treasurer's office complaining?
It's a concern that the public have a right to know what's going on. And I think that's what we need to worry about, is that their dollars are being spent wisely. That is my biggest concern as we collect taxes in the treasurer's office, that we can articulate and explain why this bill is there. And they have a right to know all these things. The thing that I think also helps them to know is that a lot of analysis has gone into figuring out how to make sure that the current budget is working well, and that if we've gone out long term, that debt is wise and has been evaluated properly, and that we've done our homework. And if the public can be reassured that we're doing our best in that regard, I think that helps a lot to move public policy forward.
Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you for your contribution today. This has been very enlightening. Thank you for inviting us into your home for the county seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Become involved, be part of the process of local government, and we'll see you next week on the county seat.
The farmer awakes as night releases its grip on darkness. This will always be home. As farmers, we understand that there is beauty in this solitude, and we also know that there is power in working together. The Utah Farm Bureau has always been there to fight for the needs of its members. To this day, Farm Bureau is still providing insurance to Utah's hard-working farm families, as well as your family. Utah Farm Bureau members also enjoy other benefits of membership, with discount programs on items ranging from vehicles and ATVs to health and wellness. The membership fees aren't big, but the results are. We've been around since 1916, and we're not leaving anytime soon. Utah Farm Bureau. We work for those who work to feed the world.
If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4.